Lobo on the drum. Yeah.
You need help?
Okay.
How about now?
Recording
Can you all
in
hear me?
progress. We can hear you.
Okay. The meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Carr,
Present.
Director Garcia,
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi,
Present.
Director Herndon,
Present.
Director Leonard,
Present.
Director Peterson,
Present.
Director Simpson,
Present.
Director Taylor,
Present.
and Chair O'Halloran.
Present.
We have 9 present.
I will now ask the Secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. Members, please mute your devices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas noches. Esta junta escolar será transmitida en español para aquellas personas que lo requieran. Si desea escuchar esta transmisión en español, por favor marque al número 312-626-6799 y ponga el número de la junta 608-130-5362. Le repito, para acceder a esta junta, a esta transmisión en español, marque el teléfono 312-626-6799 y ponga el número de identificación de la junta 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Gracias. Due to the contingencies of the COVID-19 public health pandemic, MPS buildings are closed to the public, and this meeting is being conducted virtually. Board members may be participating from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast on radio station WYMS 88.9 FM via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. We will now move to our items of business. As stated in the public notice, individuals who wish to speak were required to register in advance. I ask those waiting to speak to please remain on the platform until you are called upon. Although we are on a virtual platform, we will still follow Robert's Rules of Order, which dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair. Also, any questions or requests, including those from board members or the administration, are to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. As always, written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Written comments may be submitted to the board via the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201-2181. Or fax to 414-475-8071, or email to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda, items, and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item 1 is an informational overview and public hearing on the 2021-22 Superintendent's proposed budget. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the administration like to make comments?
Yes. Good evening, Chair O'Halloran and members of the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. We are pleased to present the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget for your consideration. The $1.3 billion budget will allow the district to focus essential investments in the schools to ensure that students have the educational opportunities they need to be successful. This budget represents the collective efforts of the administration to support the district's vision to provide an equitable educational environment that is child-centered, supports achievement, and respects and embraces diversity. We are also grateful for the referendum that the board and the voters approved last spring, strengthening high-quality education experiences for children in Milwaukee Public Schools. This is the first year of the referendum's implementation for Milwaukee Public Schools. We have provided a supplement to the budget to update the board and the community on the use of the referendum funding and the plan for the fiscal year 2021-22. We continue to educate students and support staff in schools despite the challenges of the pandemic. This past year has been unprecedented for Milwaukee Public Schools. The first year in history where the whole district opened virtual for classes. The federal government has provided stimulus funding to support school districts as we reopen to in-person learning. Another supplement to the budget has been provided as a proposal for some of that funding. At this time, I'll ask Martha Kreisman, Chief Financial Officer, who will begin guiding us through the PowerPoint by reviewing the overview. Martha?
Greetings, Chair O'Halloran and members of the committee. My name is Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The topics to be discussed tonight include a review of the budget purpose, priorities, and budget process, along with the financial outlook and presentation on the different funds included in the budget. We will look at comparative school and central services information. It will be important to consider long-range opportunities strategically, including funding that is allocated from the federal government at this time of pandemic and uncertainty. The choices we make in this budget will have impacts into the future. Before we go forward into the proposed budget, we want to first acknowledge the past year's accomplishments. Dr. Posley will help provide us with MPS highlights of the current year that will help frame our discussion going into the next year.
In Milwaukee Public Schools, we have the privilege of serving over 72,000 students that are racially, culturally, and linguistically and economically diverse. The students also have diverse learning needs, with 20% that have identified special education needs, 12% that have English learners, and about 84% are living in poverty. With the privilege of serving comes a responsibility to honor each student's culturally and life experiences, to hold consistent high expectations of all, and to provide instruction that meets the diverse learning needs of students. Our district is currently made up of 158 schools of all educational programs, including but not limited to strong college preparatory, bilingual education, career and technical education, Montessori, language immersion, and gifted and talented. In the Milwaukee Public Schools, we are preparing students for higher education. The class of 2020 received over $85 million in scholarships, helping pave the way for their post-secondary success. Next, the board goals. The district remained committed to the Milwaukee Public Schools director's goals focused on academic achievement, student and family and community engagement, and effective and efficient operations. The 5 priorities for success. To achieve the board's ambitious goals, the 5 priorities for success serves as a strategy to increase academic achievement and accountability, improve district and school culture, to develop our staff, ensure fiscal responsibility and transparency, and strengthen communication and collaboration. Prioritizing fiscal resources in schools and focusing on the 5 priorities reflects the district's unwavering commitment to maximizing the learning of all students. Under academic achievement, we are so proud for the many ways the Milwaukee Public Schools staff provided support for student achievement through this year and in the midst of the pandemic. You will see a few examples on the slide, and I will provide some additional highlights. The Ambitious Instruction Plan 3.0, as well as aligning professional development, was implemented to focus on mastery of core instructions in reading, writing, and mathematics. To support the Ambitious Instruction Plan 3.0, MPS Reads provides a list of reading selection each month posted on the website to encourage independent reading and a lifelong love for reading. An online library provides students free access to many of these books, including collections by grade bands, a foreign language and bilingual collections concerning social justice, socio-emotional awareness, mindfulness, and others. A plan was developed and implemented to deliver instructions virtually and face-to-face during COVID-19 pandemic. The students were provided with Chromebooks and hotspots, a variety of academic and social and emotional learning and enrichment learning resources were placed on the MPS website to support virtual learning during COVID-19 pandemic. The district continues to engage community partners around early childhood to leverage our resources to increase readiness and early literacy skills in our youngest learners. 12 schools were able to lower class sizes for their 4-year-old kindergarten students through the Referendum funding. 500 swag bags of educational supplies were distributed to MPS enrolled families, with pre-kindergartners and kindergartners doing a drive-through event. The MPS Montessori strategic plan continues to be implemented to enhance offering for students. The District Multicultural Multilingual Advisory Council meets regularly, and a task force meets monthly concerning enhancements and continued community engagement in the areas of bilingual and world language. The District Success Center have provided beneficial services via virtual programming this year, where behavior interventions have been unsuccessful. The Success Center used a restorative approach that restores relationships between the student, school, and family. When we look at student, family, and community engagement, the following provided examples of engaging students, families, and communities through the year. The district held a student leadership summit during the school year, providing a platform for students' voice and leadership development. We created and developed the equity, access, and inclusion that is put in place a professional development series to enrich and enhance district and school culture. We convened work groups that conducted extensive planning, collaboration, and parent surveys to develop and implement the roadmap to readiness to reopen schools during the pandemic. We offered a stop, grab, and go sites to support families through distributing of meals, masks, academic materials, and other supports. Fresh fruits and vegetables were also provided to families along with recipes and videos on how to make the recipe. We continue 12 community schools and will increase to 14 for next year. Establish community conversations to highlight various topics. Effective, efficient operations. We developed and implemented revised salary schedules to reflect $15 minimum hourly wage. We designed and implemented video recruitment and interviewing along with streamlining the application process for potential candidates for employment. We developed and streamlined application process for families enrolling in Milwaukee Public Schools to include enhancements to the electronic application and creation of a paper version in response to parents' requests. Engaged in 3-year plan to have all MPS staff members participate in work with courageous conversations about race. We implemented a paperless, online student athletic eligibility registration system. As a part of a plan to retain staff, the new teacher orientation was expanded to 5 days. School funding has been stabilized to retain staff for consistency and improvement of education programming. We have installed HEPA filtration systems in all classrooms and shared space. Public hearing and budget. I would like to acknowledge the district and the school teams that contributed to the accomplishment of these efforts. Although that was a short list of many, many initiatives and projects that were launched and implemented in the 2020-21 school year, we look forward to continuing with the same commitment in the 21-22 school year under this proposed budget before you today. With that, Martha Kreisman will share the intended purpose. Martha.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. Chair O'Halloran, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The intended purpose of the budget is to present the district's financial plan for the fiscal year. The budget then serves as a communication document for the citizens of Milwaukee who wish to understand how the school district operates and the methods used to finance those operations. The annual budget process ensures sufficient financial resources are available for educational programs, affords opportunities for collaboration and public input, and provides a basis for fiscal management and accountability to the taxpayers and community stakeholders. The budget also serves to provide highlights of the district's financial policies and determine how the additional referendum revenue will be utilized. Holding a public hearing on the budget is a compliance measure with Wisconsin State Statute, Chapter 119, but it is also a duty to the taxpayers of the city. The meetings give the administration an opportunity to provide pertinent background information on factors that influence the budget preparation, as well as factors moving forward that are likely to impact future budgets. While the budget is balanced, it is important to obtain public input on important policy matters. The board meetings held throughout the month of May provide an opportunity for the district to be transparent concerning the proposed budget and priorities for the coming year. The meetings also provide an opportunity for the public to be heard. So as an organization, we can improve performance, adjust service levels in the context of limited resources, differentiate expectations based on various needs, and understand public priorities in planning, budgeting, and managing services. These meetings provide an opportunity for review and discussion that will finally lead to an approved, balanced budget. As you will learn through this presentation, much thoughtful input along with realistic estimates have gone into the budget development so that resources could be prudently allocated to ensure rigorous and equitable learning experience for all students. Dr. Posley will highlight the fiscal year 2021 budget priorities.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board. I'm proud to say that each year as superintendent, I've made it a budget priority to maintain and increase funding to support students in schools. The graph illustrates how our fundings are spent. For every dollar budgeted, 91 cents is used to educate students. This reflects a 3 percentage point increase since the 2018-19 school year. That's almost $8 million for each percentage point. And our budget priorities. The budget reflects a commitment to staff as evidenced by an increased average salary and maintaining benefits, stabilizing school budgets, supporting students and staff, and demonstrating a commitment to schools by maintaining staff. Preserving school budgets, stabilizing the school structure around students. Overall budget priorities include stabilizing school budgets and increasing school-based staff, continuing our regional development efforts, increasing our school and improvement support, expanding opportunities in library media, art, music, physical education, and continuing playfield renovations across the city of Milwaukee. Lynn Rule will summarize the budget development timeline. Lynn.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. Director O'Halloran, members of the committee. I'm Lynn Rule, Director of Financial Planning and Budget Services. The budget development process is actually a year-round process. Budget parameters were approved by the Milwaukee Board of School Directors on January 26, 2021, to better communicate the goals for the budget. The parameters for FY22 are: MPS is committed to developing a budget that reflects a commitment to fair resources, quality and socially transformative learning, a supportive environment for employees, and an equitable education system for all, with the following parameters as guidance. Ensure that there are sufficient resources, including a textbook adoption, to provide high-quality classroom instruction at the Tier 1 level. Prioritize school budgets by adjusting and repurposing educational programming and departmental budgets. Implement the salary schedules with possible cost of living increase. Consider employee benefit modifications for eligible employees to identify cost savings and increase efficiencies. Explore operating efficiencies, including those related to transportation. Implement a multi-tiered mental health approach to promote students' mental health and social emotional learning. Strengthen a well-rounded educational experience by increasing the allocation in areas of school library, art, music, and physical education. Provide flexibility to meet standards to safeguard health, safety, and educational needs during the COVID-19 pandemic. Restore revenue to the construction fund to address deferred maintenance. Prepare the budget that is based on state law and maximizes the revenue limit. Maximizing revenue limits is important as it affects the current year and is used in the calculation of the following year revenue limit. Please also keep the other parameters in mind as we go through our future slides. The budget development, as I said, is a year-long process. These slides provide information on the board-approved timeline for the budget development. The purpose of including it here is to show that the budget development was purposeful, deliberate, collaborative, and thorough. Slide 21 shows key activities starting in December, including a strategic planning and budget committee meeting, and slide 22 shows the timetable continuing through the transmittal of the budget to the Milwaukee Common Council of the adopted budget in June. Martha Kreitzman will now speak further on the budget process.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the committee, I'm Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. Efforts to engage stakeholders are important to schools, the district, and the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. The school engages staff and families as part of the budget process and completes that process with sign-off by the School Engagement Council. At the district level, there are many opportunities for input that informs strategies. This input is taken seriously as the district plans for the needs of students and families. There have been several board committee meetings that have allowed for public testimony to discuss district strategies, including most recently a textbook adoption, budget parameters, review of the 5-year financial forecast, and others to review and approve policy changes. As part of our equitable system of support, ambitious instruction budget conversations were held with schools that have been identified for additional support. The purpose of the conversations is to make informed decisions on using resources that are focused on providing the best education for students. About 60 schools participated. Each school received a letter summarizing the conversation and providing recommendations for additional support. After school budgets are submitted, regional resolution teams provide a collaborative approach to reviewing school budgets and ensuring appropriate staffing levels. The regional resolution teams included staff from the Office of Administration, Human Resources, Academics, Finance, and the school leader as needed. Each school budget was carefully reviewed, discussed, and adjusted if needed in collaboration with the school leader. For identified high-need schools, a list was created and prioritized to provide additional resources as identified. Office budget conversations also take place where leadership from each office presents their plan for their budget to the superintendent, highlighting supports for schools and any changes being made or needs identified. All of these conversations provide insight for the superintendent to stay current concerning the needs of the schools and the district as a whole. The School Operations Fund is the main fund used to run the district and the schools. The fund provides the school allocations and the central services allocations. The major revenue categories for the School Operations Fund are property tax levy and state aids, including state equalization and integration aid, other state aids, federal aids, and local non-property tax revenues. Just over 85% of the funds come from property tax levy and state aids, which are capped by the revenue limit. The glass of water in the picture represents the revenue limit. As the name implies, the school district revenue through state aid and property tax is limited. There is a maximum amount allowed. That maximum amount is balanced between state aid and tax levy. As the district receives more state aid, in turn, it will take less tax levy to fill the glass to the revenue limit. For MPS, most of the revenue limit is made up of state aid. The revenue limit formula has not been modified in school districts for the last 25 years. Some of the impact to Milwaukee Public Schools has been a relatively flat maximum revenue per pupil since 2010-11 school year. In the governor's proposal, once again, will raise the revenue limit for school districts, which he did through the state budget the past 2 years. This slide represents the revenue limit per pupil. The revenue limit per pupil, as you can see, the actual per pupil in the fourth column has stayed relatively flat since 2010-11, when it was $10,012 per pupil. It increased slightly the last couple years due to Governor Evers' initiative and the state budget allowing for it. What the table is representing is, what if all those years MPS would have received just a 1% raise on the revenue limit per pupil? As you can see in the third column, that's our actual base revenue limit. In the second last column is the updated revenue limit with the small raise, less than the inflation rate. The very last column represents the difference. So basically, we would have received about $40 million more all those years in base revenue limit authority. Lynn Rule will now walk you through projected enrollment and fund overview.
Hello, Director O'Halloran, members of the committee. Again, I'm Lynn Rule, Director of Financial Planning and Budget Services. In fiscal year 22, MPS will have 152 schools and is projected to have 71,325 for its enrollment. This is due to the reduction in children and the high level of competition in the city of Milwaukee. We are projecting that the majority of the early grade students who didn't enroll for virtual learning during the pandemic will return to our outstanding early childhood program. We will now present detailed information in total and by fund. Excuse me. The total projected revenue for Milwaukee Public Schools in 2021-22 is $1.3 billion. This is a decrease of $37.6 million as compared to the current year. The decrease is due to an increase in school operations as a result of the referendum and a decrease in categorical funds as a result of the CARES Act, or ESSER 1, being included in FY21, but ESSER 2 and 3 not yet included in FY22. Milwaukee Public Schools has a number of funds. Our statutory funds in the center of this slide include school operations, extension fund, and construction fund. The district also has fiduciary funds or trusts held by MPS. These can be seen on the left-hand side of the slide. The last type of fund is the non-statutory funds, which includes categorical funds or grants, and those are the gold area on the right-hand side of the slide. Now, for all funds, excuse me. I'm almost there, I promise. Sorry about that. The operations fund is estimated to increase by $27.7 million. The majority of this increase, or $20 million, is due to the referendum that was approved by the city's taxpayers a year ago. The other major change is a decrease in the categorical fund as a result of the CARES Act, or ESSER 1, being included in the budget for the current year, and ESSER 2 and 3 not yet in fiscal year 22. However, a supplement has been included to show planning so far and request feedback. As we have spoken about already, the majority of the school operations fund revenue comes from property tax levy, equalization, and integration aids. The exact breakdown of these amounts will not be known until October 2021. All budgets presented to the board and finally approved by the board must be balanced. The expenditures in the operations fund balance or are equal to the revenues. As you can see, over 68% of the expenditure budget is for salaries, other wages, and benefits. The other large portion of the expenditure budget is for purchase services. A significant amount of the purchase services are used for contracted schools, transportation, open enrollment costs, utilities, and technical license. Many of these provide services directly to students and enhance enrollment. The Nutrition Services Fund is an enterprise fund and is a subset of the Operations Fund. As an enterprise fund, the Nutrition Fund expected to cover all costs with only their own revenues. The majority of revenues for the fund is from the Federal School Meal Program. Now, the majority of Nutrition Fund's expenditures are then spent on staff and food and supplies for the program. The Extension Fund is also an enterprise fund. Most of the revenues for the Extension Fund, which includes our Recreation Department, are from property tax levy. The local revenues represent the fees collected for recreation programs, and the applied surplus is a planned use of fund balance accumulated over prior years. The majority of Extension Fund purchases are for staff and purchase services. The purchase services are for contracts with community learning centers and safe places programs that provide direct services to children. Categorically aided programs or grants have been reduced in fiscal year 22. The majority of this change is due to the CARES Act being included in the current year. We are presenting ESSER grants information to the board, and they can be found through ESB as Attachment 7. Although the funds were approved by the federal government this year, DPI has chosen to reflect both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 in fiscal year 22. This will increase the grants total by a large amount. Next, we will talk a little bit about school and central services budgets. We have increased FTEs, or full-time equivalent positions, by 57 overall, which is a 0.6% increase. Teachers have increased by 39 positions, which is a 0.8% increase, and food service manager positions have increased by 9, which is actually a 9.7% increase. The majority of the school operations fund, or $919.1 million of the $1.037.7 billion total, is budgeted in school and school accounts, an increase of $34.3 million. The only other major change was a reduction in other accounts of $9.8 million. As spoken about earlier, some of the highest priorities for the budget are to stabilize school budgets, increase school-based staff, and increase school improvement. This is demonstrated by the fact that MPS's administrative and other costs per DPI is 19%, as opposed to the state average percentage of 20.6%. We will now talk a bit about our long-range opportunities. As can be seen in the last column of this chart, revenues are projected to increase by $9.1 million, while expenditures are expected to increase by $143.4 million between 2021-22 and 2024-25. As a result, MPS must find additional funding or reduce expenditures going forward. Martha Kreitzman will now discuss impacts to the budget.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the committee, I'm Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. Inflation is a reality, and as you saw earlier, the revenue limit did not keep up with inflation. We are so thankful that the community approved the reoccurring operational referendum last spring that will be phased in over 4 years, providing $57 million this year and $20 million more in fiscal year '22, so that we can reinstitute service levels for our students. In addition, there are COVID-19 impacts that are still unknown. Fortunately, the federal government has provided stimulus funding to help at a time like this. On April 7, 2020, the City of Milwaukee voters overwhelmingly approved a recurring operational referendum to exceed the state-imposed revenue limit. The slide represents the referendum funding and the categories that are being supported through the extra revenue limit funding. As you can see, the categories are early childhood class size. These categories were supported in the current year, and they will be supported again in the proposed budget and explained in the referendum proposed supplement to the budget. So early childhood, reducing class sizes in early childhood, attracting and retaining staff, professional support staff, which includes psychologists, social workers, and other supports, nursing, library, art, music, and physical education, advanced academics, and career and technical education. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund is a stimulus bill from the federal government to help school districts as they reopen to in-person learning. The chart provides a summary of the ESSER funds for Milwaukee Public Schools. There are 3 ESSER funding streams. The first was the CARES Act. Milwaukee Public Schools received $56 million. $15 million provided services to private schools. The remaining $41 million was used in MPS for providing masks and other personal protective equipment for staff and students, and also we purchased food for the community as we did our stop, grab, and go sites. We provided technology so students could learn from home, including Chromebooks and hotspots, and also online learning platforms and online subscriptions to help enhance the learning environment for students as they learn from home.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, I would like to acknowledge and thank all the district staff and stakeholders for their contributions, along with the Milwaukee Board of School Directors for their support throughout this process. Prioritizing fiscal resources for schools reflects the district's unwavering commitment to eliminating the disparities of educational opportunities and outcomes that exist among our students today. The annual budget process affords an opportunity for collaboration and public input. We look forward to feedback and discussion on the proposed budget from the board and the community as we work together to improve opportunities for our students. That concludes our presentation. We are prepared and ready to entertain any questions that you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. For members of the committee, I am now going to go around. I'll just do it alphabetically. We'll do 2 rounds of questions, and then we'll move to public testimony. And in order to keep it timely, we're going to just do 1 question. You can clarify the response with administration if you have questions about that particular question. And then I'll do another round and then move. But I know sometimes we entertain 2 or 3 questions per round. And so in order to allow public testimony to happen sooner than later, we're going to try to keep it to 1, please. So with that, I will just start with Director Carr. You're muted. Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I have a lot of questions. So the first one that I have, and I want to thank the superintendent and the administration for providing the overview of the budget. First question is, how is the budget impacting students and student achievement, and specifically to speak to the enrollment projection, we're losing legacy costs because of the little ones transitioning out. And so how are we tracking the loss of the early childhood or K3 or pre-K3 on through fifth grade enrollment? How are we tracking the students to determine where they're going, so ultimately determine reasons for them leaving, I guess? That's the first question. And let me know if I'm going too fast or if I need to take a break. My other question is, how was the student enrollment projected? Was it projected based on last year's numbers or this year's numbers? Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the board. One of the things that we kind of talked about, some of the things that we brought up was the idea of putting 91 cents in of every dollar into the classroom. That means more teachers, more supportive services, more wraparound services for young people, and then also looking at how we can get down to smaller class sizes and all of those kinds of things. Those are things that we're looking at as far as enhancing instruction. And through the ambitious instruction plan 3.0, we're looking at how do we maximize our strength in the area of math, reading, and writing, because we know it feeds into all the other content areas, science, social studies, writing, all of those kinds of things feed directly into there. So my belief and the administration's belief is that more we put out at the school where the rubber truly meets the road is working with our young people and enhancing academic achievement as we go forward. And as far as when we talk about projection, the projection is 71,325 students. And we are tracking our projections. We usually look at every single year, anywhere in the neighborhood from 1,500 students down to 1,000 students that are leaving. And we have had a few years where we have been able to stabilize that. And so what we are doing is making sure that we're following up with phone calls. We have individuals that are out knocking doors and doing those kinds of things to make sure that we can bring those students back, working with our school communities to make sure that we are exhausting those lists. And, like, for instance, at the start of the school year, we have a session every single day to track down every one of those students that show on our list. But we also do that same thing before the school year ends, working with our principals. They have to come in over the summer to check on their enrollment numbers to make sure their enrollment numbers are moving forward. And then we have also identified areas in the city in schools in the district where the enrollment is starting to decline. And then we put energies around that. We have a group of individuals that work during the summer, knocking on doors, recruiting. We got people out at all different locations. You will see that this summer. You come out of a location, someone is going to be offering an opportunity to come to Milwaukee Public Schools and be a part of it. We talked about the early childhood initiative that we're doing with all of our partners around the city that helps us to get into locations and to work with, that 1837 piece, looking at how do we get our children from birth up until third grade, up into fifth grade, basically working with them throughout to make sure that we have them. We're doing a number of things to track students and enrollment, encouraging individuals. We had a number of different enrollment fairs this year in order to increase enrollment, looking at every single grade level. And we see that our enrollment drops off at some of our transition grades. So we're working with our teachers before the end of the school year, because teachers are the best recruiters that we have in the district, because they will go to the school that parents will follow their directions. If they said, go to this school, that's the school that's going to go to. So making sure everyone has an assignment for the end of the school year.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Director Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Posley and the administration team for sharing that very informative, high-level information about a budget that is very complex and multi-level. So I know that there's going to be a lot of questions raised, but I guess the question that is kind of top of mind for me is in regards to the ESSER funding, and just to kind of gain a little bit more clarity, and just so that folks that are listening can also get some clarity around, we mentioned that there's 3 levels and stages for ESSER funding. So for ESSER 1, that's already been implemented and kind of planned and allocated expenditures in this year's budget. Does that essentially mean that we should be assuming that this is already money that will be spent? If we can just get a little bit more clarity around that. And then I have a follow-up question.
Okay. Administration?
Okay, Chair O'Halloran, Director Garcia, and members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. So there are 3 levels or 3 stimulus bills that were provided, and we call them ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. ESSER 1, as I said, was the CARES Act. ESSER 2 is the more recent one of $225 million for the district, and the performance period goes through September 30th, 2023. And then there's ESSER 3, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, and the application for that funding is not out yet, so we cannot apply for it yet, but we've heard that our allocation is going to be $506 million. And 20% of that funding needs to be used to mitigate learning loss. The ESSER 2 supplement that was provides some detail on planning that was done. While the planning was committees that were formed around 3 areas, those areas were identified due to much of the work that was done on the reopening of schools. And so we had committees work on reopening schools. We had much community input into that. And we also had many board meetings that provided opportunity for community to give more input. And we use the ideas that were formed from that input to create this plan that we now want to present to get even more input to see if we are putting the funding in the right areas at the right levels. So accelerating learning in the proposed plan had $93 million proposed for that, for direct services for students, high quality materials, and professional development. Health and wellness allocated almost $51 million for mental health services for students, COVID-19 and health-related, social emotional learning, physical education, and experiential learning. And then there was a facilities area, and that mostly $183 million of the almost $199 million that's being proposed is for air quality, plumbing, which is really water bottle stations at schools to replace bubblers, electrical, and interior work. The total then that's proposed for the ESSER 2 planning is over the $225 million. And it came to $343.6 million. So as we discuss and deliberate and decisions are made, it could be that some of this could be moved into the ESSER 3 funding, which will come this year, but we just don't have the application yet.
Thank you for that. And I guess my follow-up is, in the supplemental packet that we received today, it indicates, just kind of like what you went over, specifically indicating that the next stages of planning would be to receive the, input of students, staff, families, and community members. So is that the, public hearing sessions that we're proposing, or is that like an additional pathways and opportunities that will be created? So I just want to get a little bit more clarity as to what those opportunities to gather input to inform, allocation of ESSER 2 and then eventually ESSER 3. Like, what does that look like for, our folks listening in and for us participating in these discussions?
Chair O'Halloran.
Yeah.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the committee, members of the board. Yes, what we are looking at in ESSER 2 is the idea that the community and everyone will get an opportunity to weigh in during this month to kind of talk about what needs to happen and what needs to be removed or added or whatever those situations are. ESSER 3, right now, we don't have an application for ESSER 3. And as soon as we get that application, we'll be coming back to the board to walk through that same process the same way, which will give us more time to do really community engagement, bringing in student groups and all of the key stakeholders, because some of the guidelines with ESSER 3 calls for a number of individuals to sign off and weigh in that they have had input into this process.
And Chair O'Halloran and Director Garcia and members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. Even tonight, while we're meeting, the District Advisory Council is meeting, and the plan is being presented to them tonight to get their input. It's an online meeting, and so they're being asked to enter into the chat some of their input and ideas, and also get an opportunity to have questions answered. And we plan to also do that same idea with the Student Advisory Committee, the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee, and also work with others during this month while we're also presenting to the board and getting community input that way.
Thank you. And Director Gokul Gandhi?
Yes, Dr. Posley, administration, thank you for that presentation. My question is around the communications plan for the ESSER 2 spending. Oftentimes our parents in our community, because of all the other things that are happening in the world and happening in their lives, don't always know. So I would like to know if it's been given thought about a really intentional communications plan. It's great that we've got some time here. It seems like because the application isn't out, I'd like to know what what the plan is. How do we plan on making sure that students, parents know, that the community knows, and if that's a priority for internal district employees and also external.
Administration?
Members of the board, are we ESSER 2 or ESSER 3? I heard 2.
Well,
Is it ESSER 2?
I guess both.
Both. And ESSER 2, there was a timeline to make sure that we got everything to the board. So we were not afforded the opportunity to do all of the outreach that's needed. And we just looked at using this opportunity for that extended outreach and communication to families and make it known to be able to do just that. With ESSER 3, we will have an opportunity to do a robust rollout of looking at all stakeholders. There is a list of stakeholders that we must get input from, and we will be following that list, that guideline that has been laid out with DPI.
Thank you.
And Director Herndon?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the presentation presented by our administration. My question at this point specifically is in regards to additional funding for equipment that the young people will need. in terms of covert protection for wind instruments and the music program. I don't think we had to worry about that too much in this past year because we were educating virtually, but now our goal is to get back into school and get all the programs activated, especially in the fall. So that is a big concern to me. I had meant to bring it up last week, but that's a concern of mine, as well as the music teachers too. The wind instruments most definitely need the cover that goes over the horn area of the wind instruments. And then there's another type of guard that's needed. I want to know if that is included anywhere in the budget. I've looked, I haven't been able to find anything.
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, Director Herndon, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. We are learning so much during this pandemic, and this is something I would have never even known about, but I did learn about it recently. And as we were planning the ESSER 2 funding, that did get into that funding stream. And remember, that funding can, once we know that we're good to move forward with it, we can start spending that funding. So music instruments are in there on page 8, and it's music-specific PPE for wind brass students and additional guitars and ukuleles so that students don't have to share instruments. And so that is in the ESSER 2 funding plan, the supplement, okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Director Leonard.
Sorry, I had to take that off so I could be heard. Thank you. I have about 35 questions, and I know I can't ask all those, but there's one major question that I feel I have to ask. So having been one of those people that actually went door to door and also spent the last 4 months talking to different parents and whatnot in our community, two things were abundantly clear on why they voted for the referendum and why they still have a lot of hope in MPS. And those two things are, one, they want to see classroom size reduction, not just at K3, but at early childhood, but all the way through our system. And secondly, they want to see an expansion of our programs, our bilingual programs, our art, music, Phi-Ed, all of those things. They want to see quality that their children deserve and feel and I do believe they deserve that. So my question really is this: with all this money and all this computations that we put together on the budget, and you've done a great job with it, I do appreciate the hard work. At a 2.8% deficit after all of that, what's the long-term, have you talked about the long-term goals at all of some way to make this a reality? Because I believe we're sort of at a precipice. If we can't make that come through, it's going to be very hard to hang on to our parents and have them send them to MPS. I think we have to look at the big picture. Your input would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the board, it's going to be twofold here. I'm going to take the first part of the question, or second part of the question, and Martha Kreitzman will take the second part. Expansion, we are looking at, like, for instance, use the example of bilingual ed, and we talked about every single year we are adding bilingual schools and programs and expanding those programs into all schools all over the city of Milwaukee. We are having standalone programs and also offering world language programs into all of our classrooms to make sure that we're competitive and make sure the future goal is to make sure that all of our children are able to have access to another language and to hopefully to have our students truly bilingual all over the district. And so that is one of the things that we're doing. The other piece is like Montessori schools. I talked about the Montessori program and what's happening there. We talked about gifted and talented and AP and IB programs, the expansion of those programs. We're looking at what families truly want and where families register in when they come, the arts, the gifted and talented programs, STEM programs, Project Lead the Way, community schools, all of those type of programs are programs that families are attractive to, and looking at how we can use those, how we can use those programs to get more students coming into our district. And also early learning, the early childhood initiative, that piece, getting our students here early, because if we can get them early, we can keep them. And then those are the kind of expansions opportunities that we're looking at, and you see them throughout this particular budget. And so, Martha, if you would go through and talk about the other piece with the extending.
Chair O'Halloran and Vice Chair Leonard, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. And as Dr. Posley was mentioning, all the things are the opportunities that are being funded through the referendum. There was much work done with community engagement throughout that process, including a task force, listening sessions, and surveys that were done. And these were the categories that rose to the top that the community was interested in seeing to engage the students in Milwaukee Public Schools. So we believe that the referendum will attract families to Milwaukee Public Schools as they see these great opportunities returning. And as far as class size reduction, hard decisions have to be made because there is a limited budget. And so the decision was made that the greatest impact could be made at the early levels to give those students a great start in their education at Milwaukee Public Schools.
Thank you. We will move to President Peterson.
Thank you very much, and thank the administration and their entire team to put together this budget. It's really a real Herculean task. And I have one question, but I just want to say that one of the issues with both board members and staff and parents and students digesting this budget is that there are many different places that similar things are funded. And so I'm going to ask that in the next, by next week, that the administration provide us the following. And it's so they don't have to, they can say yes or no tonight, I guess, but which would be to compare FY20, FY21, and our projected FY22 budgets, and to basically pull together like all this expenditures that are going for the music program, all the expenditures that are going for art, FIED, library, restorative practice. I have this listed so I can give this to people. Mental health, trauma-focused staff, ethnic studies, BLMA, and First Nation studies, and class size reduction. Because those, and if they're grouped together, then it will be easier for us to see what's covered and what's not covered. And similarly, a request is that the total number, in terms of art and music and FIED and libraries, sometimes again, it's hard to figure out what progress we're making in terms of the referendum. So I'd ask that we have a total number of teachers in those areas, like listed, especially FIED, art, music, and library media specialists, and then a school-by-school listing of how those FTEs are distributed. And it's not like we're going to intervene in terms of schools, but it's going to show us the following, that the referendum really worked in terms of the libraries. This past year, there were 15 librarians and 22.5 paras scheduled into the high schools and some into the elementaries. But this year in the budget, there's no more additional librarians listed, and I'm concerned about that. And nor is there any, as far as I can tell, that any additional world language teachers listed in the budget for, part of it is because the referendum monies are smaller than they were initially. And so I'm not critical, but I want it to come to the board's attention so we as a collective group and with influence of parents and students and other community members can make informed decisions. It will make it easier for all of us. And so I guess my question is that possible for the administration to pull that information together?
Administration, yeah.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, yes, we'd be more than happy to do that. And I would also, if we could cross-reference notes to make sure we wrote it down, but to make sure that we have the exact request, we'll be able to make it happen.
We will do.
And
Madam
if I could add, Chair O'Halloran,
Yes.
and Director Peterson, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer, in the referendum supplement, there are some tables that provide for the current year. Well, it shows a comparison from the year right before the referendum to this current year, how many FTEs by school. It doesn't do it for every single area, but it does for many of them. So you can get some of that information there, but we'll be happy to provide you with more of it.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I was going to ask that Director Peterson submit the list to our office so that we can be sure that the board members are receiving the information as it comes from the administration.
Will do.
Thank you.
And if any other board members have any other categories, it might be helpful to also submit those so that we can try to consolidate this into one request.
So noted.
Yeah. All right. And Director Simpson.
Thank you, Chair O'Halloran, and thank you to administration and the team for putting together this budget. It's quite the document. Would like to also thank Director Peterson for that ask. I think it'll be very helpful moving forward. I wanted to talk about social emotional learning. I know that when you think of the referendum, a lot of the things that students in particular were asking for fell under that idea of social emotional learning. And to me, what it looks like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we are sort of holding steady with counselors, psychologists, social workers, nurses, and restorative practices. I'm looking at the referendum supplement on page 7. But with the ESSER funds and the other supplemental document, it looks like the plan is to kind of boost up our restorative practices program. Is there also a plan to kind of add those additional counselors, psychologists, social workers, nurses? I think that we all are aware that next year will be challenging. We are going to have students returning to school with, all kinds of different experiences. And I just see we see it now in our classrooms, that increased need for that type of support staff. So just wondering if that's sort of part of the conversation for these ESSER funds.
Administration?
Chair O'Halloran and Director Simpson, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. As I look at the referendum, you're correct that we are holding steady with the amount of staffing that's in there for the extra counselors, psychologists, social workers, and nurses. In the ESSER funding, there's a section on social emotional learning. While that's not adding staffing, and some of that was on purpose, at least at this point, for the proposed supplement, because this money is limited to 3 years, and then it'll be gone, and we have to be able to afford this staffing. So the decision was made, and as we talk across the nation to other school districts and the Council of Great City Schools, it's been kind of advised, don't add a lot of staff, because then how are you going to, there'll be like a cliff of staff all of a sudden. And so it's not like we can't hire staff, but we have to make some serious decisions about where is that a good idea and where may it not be such a great idea, And
we have, Chair O'Halloran, members of the board, we also have some programs that has just been truly amazing for our young people with the restorative practices piece that we, beefed up dollars there, the Black and Latino Male Office, the Equity, Access, and Inclusion piece. So provided services that are working for children right now, enhancing that and moving forward, and also looking at a lot of professional development for our staff so that they can also fill that gap. So working with that, having the professional to work with our teaching staff, if it's a psychologist or social worker or school counselor, and it's the idea of some of those things that they can work with around to support mental health in every way we possibly can, and various programs that are out there that can be used as well.
Okay, we'll move to Vice President Taylor.
Thank you, O'Halloran, and thank you, administration. I want to say possibly a two-part question and comment. I have the equity and mental health part of it. In the MPS, I know there are several services that we do connect our students and families to. I just don't believe that they are informed that we offer these services. So what are we doing in accordance of the mental health services, aligning it with equity and anti-race bias within this budget? And how is it spelled out so that people can comprehend that's what it is?
Thank you, administration.
Okay, Chair O'Halloran and Director Taylor, members of the committee, Martha Weitzman, Chief Financial Officer. As far as our courageous conversations that we have a 3-year plan for, that is supported within our ESEA funding, and it's also supported through this ESSER funding, besides the other staff that are funded through our budget that facilitate those programs, including our Office of Equity, Access, and Inclusion and our Student Services area. So, and in the ESSER supplement, there is work around not only the restorative practices, but anti-racism and bias professional development. And as far as mental health services, that's also in the ESSER supplement to expand the services that we already provide at some of the schools that has been very effective and helpful to families.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board also looking at from a Director Taylor talked about a communication piece as far as parents looking at a menu of services that is offered to our young people on a daily basis, and how families can have their students tapped into that is the other piece. And that was one of the things that we learned through the pandemic, how we are able to offer those services and looking, from a menu of services and wraparound support from personnel throughout the school, but looking at tailoring that piece on a menu of services and how we can make it known to families what we have to offer for their young person that may need that support.
And if I can say one more thing, this is Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. As far as the anti-racist, another idea that was provided to us was to have type of mini grants included within the ESSER funding. So we did include that so that some schools could apply for that based on a special project to help their school community in working in this area.
All right. Thank you. At this time, I'm just going to pass the gavel, I guess, to Vice Chair Leonard so I can ask a question.
Director
Or do you want me to
O'Halloran,
just go around and wait till the end?
Director O'Halloran, you
I'm not in the
can.
queue.
Hello?
Yep, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me? I just wanted you to be aware you can ask a question. Passing the gavel more is for extended conversation. So you can ask your question. Okay.
I mean, we don't really have a gavel to pass anyway. So, yeah, I think I would like to just piggyback off of Director Peterson, and this is less a question and more of a comment. When I get this budget, I feel like I simultaneously have just so much information and also like no information. And if I handed this budget to a parent and I said, tell me, are our priorities straight? I don't feel like they would be able to tell me, yeah, you're doing it right. So I think the ask that Director Peterson has put before us, I think that would definitely help us get there. I think over the coming year, it would be very helpful to, I don't know if we tap into people from the DAC or we ask, I don't know. I just think we need to find a way to clearly communicate to people, this is how many teachers we have, and do we have the right allocation of teachers? And I think that I'm kind of struggling to concisely say what I'm trying to get to here, but basically, I think we should. I hesitate to always ask for another committee, but form a work group that would be able to come up with a way to kind of demystify this. I know that there are parents who communicate their preferences through the schools, and then the schools report up through this process, but I just still feel like the end product is kind of a confusing for most lay people. Most people who aren't engaged in this work for year after year. So I don't really have a question, but more something for us to consider moving forward is to try to convene a group of people who would be able to provide input on how to make this more accessible. I know it's accessible on the website, but how do we really make it accessible to parents and community members? And with that, I will just do another round of questions. I will keep it. Oh, Director Peterson.
I was just going to suggest that we go to the public commentary before we do another round of questions. People have been waiting. It's an hour and a half into the meeting, if that's possible. I don't know what you think.
That's fine with me. As long as everybody, can I get a show of thumbs? We're good. All right. Madam Secretary, can we move to public testimony, please?
Madam Chair, the first speaker that we have on the platform to speak is Linda Barton. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Okay.
Hello.
Linda Barton, B as in boy, A-R-T-O-N.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So I begin. Thank you. My name is Linda Barton, an alumni of South Division High School, a high school secretary, a union member, and I am MPS proud. I have been with MPS since 2015 and a member of AFSCME Local 1053. since then. I have volunteered to express the sentiment of my fellow union members and coworkers. It is our collective hope you consider hazard pay for secretaries for what we have endured and offer the option of working remotely on deep clean Wednesdays. I was also asked to say, how come no one has asked us how we're doing? I would like to share some of my experiences during this last year in the pandemic. It was a Friday the 13th, and one of the secretaries exclaimed, "It's been declared a world pandemic." I rushed home like millions into my grocery store to buy what I could to survive, called my sons and all of my family to have and warn them that they should prepare. I did have a conversation with my principal, brought my concerns to him about my nervousness to work in the school, and let him know that I do have two sisters that I take care of because of their medical conditions, and I have their care in mind. I also said to him that I probably would have been more at ease to work in the school.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Patricia Smudio. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Smudio, Samudio.
Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Posley and members of the committee. As stated previously, my name is Patricia Smudio, and I have been a proud MPS secretary for over 30 years. I am also a proud ASME Local 1053 member and have been during my entire tenure. Earlier this week, my fellow union MPS secretaries met to discuss our collective concerns. Anyone you meet knows that the secretary is an integral part of any school office. Without us, the school would not function. We handle matters involving students, parents, administration, and the community at large daily. We all love our schools. I wouldn't have chosen to stay with MPS for 30 years if I didn't love what I do. However, myself and my fellow employees, secretaries, do not feel recognized for what we have endured these last several months during the pandemic. I have volunteered on behalf of my fellow union members and would like you to consider the following. One, most secretaries have been required to be in person every day since March 16th of 2020. Secretaries didn't receive information regarding their ability to work remotely. Some secretaries had to work out their own schedules, while others were told working remotely was not an option. During the closures, we came in contact with a variety of individuals. We distributed Chromebooks, received deliveries, and had staff contact. Some MPS schools offices certainly serve as spaces where ill child waits to be picked up. Unfortunately, secretaries are not even considered for hazard pay. Wednesdays are virtual learning days, and secretaries are required to work in person. Some MPS classrooms and entire schools have closed due to the COVID positive test, and secretaries are still required to work within their building. Secretaries need to know that we are seen and we are a valued member of MPS team. We ask that you recognize the employees who really make the school run efficiently and effortlessly, the secretaries. We are asking that secretaries receive hazard pay for all that we have endured, backdated to the start of the pandemic. There are over 300 of us, and we are the hardest working, dedicated, most overlooked MPS employee. We ask that you take this request under consideration and vote yes to hazard pay and ability to work remotely on Wednesdays for secretaries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Angela Harris. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Angela, Angela, last name Harris, Harris.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair O'Halloran, members of the board. In October 2019, when the board voted to pass salary schedules, I spoke about permit teachers like myself being completely left out of the conversation. I remember then Director, now President Peterson, saying that he would work on this next budget cycle. Well, here we are. Imagine my surprise to see $0 allocated for raises for permanent teachers who have served as teacher of record in a classroom while working towards certification during a pandemic. Last September, Black educators made up 276 of the 574 permanent, intern, and supplemental teachers in our district. I can only imagine with our successful teacher pipeline program, MPSU, that number has likely increased. This is a racial justice issue in a district that claims to care about equity and recruiting and retaining educators of color. Words are just performative when not coupled with action. District administration can't talk about attracting and retaining Black, Brown, and Indigenous educators while proposing another budget that devalues our pre-certification commitment to our schools, classrooms, and this district. Black educators already pay an invisible tax that leads to burnout. We have to deal with being the Black and Brown child whisperer, contend with racial microaggressions from our white colleagues, and often asked to take the lead on racial justice and equity work. That invisible tax is levied when we take on this challenging work without certification, then are shortchanged when it comes to compensation. Today, Black teachers are underrepresented in the workforce and are leaving at higher rates than any other racial
30 seconds.
group. If we are to change that in our district, we need to move beyond simply saying we want to recruit and retain more educators of color and implement the policies that actually do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Ingrid Walker Henry. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Ingrid Walker Henry, WALKER-HENRY.
Thank you.
I am the Vice President of the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. In 2020, during a pandemic, voters turned out in huge numbers to support the students of Milwaukee Public Schools by voting yes for a referendum. The referendum passed with the understanding that much needed classes, services, and resources will be restored to our students. The two items I'm speaking to tonight are funding art education in all of our schools and the issue of student class size and student caseload reduction. The referendum guaranteed the restoration of arts in MPS. MTEA members worked to create policies that would increase arts education across the district and to ensure that students who had seen the least would become the first in line. MTEA is here to ensure that the commitment to the students and families of this district are upheld. The other item that voters wanted was smaller class size and special education caseload reduction. Parents and educators know that smaller class sizes are beneficial to students' social emotional well-being and academic achievement. MTEA is asking that the proposed budget be amended to include funds that will guarantee reduced student class sizes and student caseload sizes. The voters in Milwaukee have tasked us to do what is right for the students of Milwaukee Public Schools, and that includes lowering the class sizes for all learners as well as the caseload of special education teachers. Students deserve to have the attention needed to be successful. This is a huge undertaking, but it must start with the budget and a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Mike Van Pelt. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. This is Mike Van Pelt, V-A-N-P-E-L-T.
Thank you.
Been a teacher in MPS for 29 years, and I'm currently at Riverside. Chair O'Halloran, members of the committee, and the MPS administration, on behalf of the Milwaukee Music Educators Association, I would like to welcome the new school board directors and congratulate Directors Peterson and Taylor on their accession to their new leadership positions. We look forward to working with you. I'm speaking tonight as a member of the Milwaukee Music Educators Association, a group of MPS music teachers who presented the music policies and procedures to the board 2 years ago, the implementation of which is already positively affecting MPS students across the district by implementing true equity in their education. Just over a week ago, leaders from the MMEA met with Ms. Kreitzman and Ms. Rule from Finance and Ms. Garcia and Dr. Bowling from the Music Department or from the Fine Arts Department to discuss some proposed additions to the upcoming budget supporting the music policy. We deeply appreciate the additions mentioned tonight and support President Peterson's asked for clarity in just where the funding for all the budgets for art, music, FIED, et cetera, are listed for accessibility. And we're happy to continue working with the administration to help with this clarity. Also, the union recently brought administration a proposal for some changes to the traveling music teacher positions, the TMTs. These changes were largely in how scheduling for them works, granting them both reasonable prep time as professional teachers and confirming their mileage eligibility. This would make the positions more desirable and thus easier to attract quality applicants as we expand the TMT program as per the schedule in the music policy. With the recovery required next year due to the pandemic, these teachers are highly necessary adjuncts to the site-based music teachers, possibly more so than any time since TMTs were first instituted back in the 1930s. I'm not positive that the board members have seen the proposal yet, but we would be happy to share it. And we strongly hope that the administration adopts these proposed changes to the TMT positions, as they entail minimal cost, but could have a massive effect on the equity of teaching our students. Thank you for your attention to these items.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Guillermo Valdez. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Guillermo Valadez, Valadez.
Thank you.
And I'm actually a registered plumbing apprentice for Milwaukee Public Schools. You guys might remember me from last year. Last year, May 21st, I spoke during the school board meeting. I mentioned at exactly an hour, 48 minutes, how I was promised from high school. I was a 4.0 student, and I was introduced to opportunity to get a taste for the trades via an apprenticeship through MPS. I was promised once I completed the apprenticeship, if my work was, if it showed that I put interest and actually effort into it, that I would be given an apprenticeship leading to future employment through MPS, and I would basically be there for my career. So I had opportunities. I had plenty of scholarships, all sorts of stuff. I gave it all up because I wanted MPS to be my future. I wanted my position as a plumber in MPS. And well, as I was looking over the documents for the budget this year, it seems like my position is not on there. Now, last year, at exactly
Madam Chair,
2 hours and 18 minutes.
this would be a matter of a human resource matter. So can we ask the speaker to call our office tomorrow morning, and we will be happy to assist. The Office of Board Governance. Can I give you a direct number, please?
Is it okay, Mr. Valadez?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. The number to the Office of Board Governance is 414-475-8284.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. If you have other comments directly related to the budget and not specific about the position, please continue.
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I look forward to receiving your call.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Nicolo Honorato. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Lovely. My name is Nicolo Honorato, Onorato.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair O'Halloran, members of the board. I am a teacher, a parent, and a product of MPS. My high school experience was shaped by access to extracurriculars and the arts. I found a love of theater, of music, of performing. And as a teacher at Reagan, I've seen these passions kindled in the eyes of my students in our musicals and our music ensembles. I've seen our co-curricular activities like my stage crew teach skills like painting and building, but also demonstrating practical examples of the Pythagorean theorem. My students have the ability to expand their education through arts and music because we have built a curriculum and a culture that values visual and performing arts. Shouldn't all schools have that same opportunity? The citizens of this city believe that they do. They voted overwhelmingly to support the district by supporting the MPS referendum. Many of us personally knocked on doors, manned phone banks, and the district has made a promise to support art and music in every school for every student. This means that we must hire more teachers, more art teachers, more music teachers. It means that we recruit people into the district to teach our students and pay them for the important work that they're doing. The board must honor the promises to hire staff and provide resources necessary to establish art and music programs in every school. Every student has the right, should see themselves every student should have in every school should have the same opportunities to experience diverse and equitable education, including electives such as art, band, choir, PLTW, IB, and AP classes. Students enrolled in reading and math interventions in place of electives are being done a disservice, and we should be giving students an opportunity to find passion in subjects, not just remind them that they're not currently meeting state standards. School successes should be the breadth and depth of student experiences and not the circles in a Scantron. Students should see themselves in education, not just reflected in the professionals in front of their class, but also in the content being taught. Students of all ethnicities and races would benefit from learning the stories and histories of the people who look like them, that have been stripped away by generations of colonial imperial curriculum that tries to erase the great civilizations of this world. We must have ethnic studies as full accredited classes through high school level. As teachers, we enter the classroom to plant seeds of knowledge that will bloom into the future. And as leaders in this district, it falls to you to shine the light that will help this grow. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Crystal Ely. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Crystal Ely, CrystalEaly.
Thank you.
Good evening, administration, chair, and directors. I am a proud MPS employee of 28 years. I am speaking in support of 40 hours for all EAs who desire to work 40 hours. We have been fighting for 40 hours for over 5 years. I know you said in a previous budget meeting that this was not economically possible, but I believe that there was without looking at the whole picture. Most of the pairs in the district are already working 30 hours, 32, 35, and 40 hours. Safeties are at 40 hours, and we thank Director Taylor for being instrumental and all that supported the 40 hours for PCs during the last budget round, who desired it. Now I'm asking you all to have a little more compassion and add 10 hours to a already 30-hour pair position, 8 hours to a 32-hour pair position, and 5 hours to a 35-hour pair position. We're all hardworking employees, just as our colleagues are, and we deserve to not have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make a decent pay. There was a time when we were working in the MPS district had an extra bonus where medical insurance and retirement was the envy of most other districts. That has changed. And when we start paying into our medical insurance and our medical and our pension, our pay seemed to have shortened.
30 seconds.
So I ask you tonight to look hard and think hard and approve 40 hours for all paras in this district. This year has been an extra hard year for the paras, so thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Amy Mizialko. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Amy Mizialko, Mizialko. Chair Halloran, Superintendent Posley, and School Board Directors. I'm the president of the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association, speaking on behalf of 5,100 MPS staff across dozens of job classes in the district. While the proposed 2021-2022 MPS budget contains items that MTEA members support, the proposed budget does not yet include the critical funds necessary to stabilize the MPS workforce and to stabilize MPS classrooms for our students. MPS must utilize this budget to retain current experienced MPS staff and to attract much needed new MPS staff to fill persistent vacancies in multiple job classes. MTEA is asking that the proposed budget be adjusted in the following ways. Number one, MTEA has submitted proposals for a substitute teacher salary schedule and a pay rate adjustment to attract and retain the hundreds of subs necessary to rebuild the MPS sub pool that was decimated after Act 10 previous Superintendent Thornton and the previous board, our schools cannot run without a strong subpool that students and teachers can count on every day. Number two, MTA has brought 40-hour positions in every job class as a budget priority to the board and administration consistently. Last year, the administration said this item would cost $10 million. This year, they say it will cost $11 million. But administration has never provided the math to back up this claim. Many current MPS 30-hour employees work extra hours paid by their school budget, MPS rec, or third-party childcare providers that function within MPS. With a commitment to fully supporting our students and fully staffing our schools, MPS must set aside funds for 40-hour positions for all workers who desire them. Third, MTA is calling on MPS to freeze the actual cost of employees' contributions for healthcare at current levels to retain and attract staff by relieving workers of increased health insurance costs. MTA is asking that funds be set aside in this budget to freeze health insurance costs for all MPS workers in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Elizabeth Kosmak. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Elizabeth Kosmak, Kosmach.
Thank you.
I do not support the administration budget at this time. When the referendum was happening, I was knocking on doors and phone banking. When I talked to Milwaukee residents, we talked about how money for the referendum will be used for smaller class sizes. Having class sizes more than 30 students is unacceptable, which still hasn't happened. Also, I talked about caseloads for special education teachers. Caseloads of 16 to 24 are unacceptable. Many SPED teachers leave because they can go to a neighborhood district and get a caseload half of what MPS has. This budget needs to start creating a pathway to lower class sizes and caseloads because that is what we told Milwaukee residents we would do. This pandemic has taught us how short-staffed MPS is. How do we hire and retain staff? By offering them a 40-hour work week with decent pay and steps for all job classes. Our EA, building service helpers, food service workers, subs are needed for running a successful school. They deserve the same respect as everyone else by being offered 40 hours a week. We need to put that in the budget. Essential frontline workers kept MPS running during the shutdown. They deserve hazard pay. That needs to go in the budget. It is a shame that MPS has not done this already. Finally, health insurance costs should not be put on the workers, but the district. There should be a freeze on all health insurance costs for employees. That should be in the budget. We know that MPS has the money. Didn't we get money from the state and federal government from the COVID-19 relief package? Wasn't funding a reason why we were pushed back into the classroom during a global pandemic? Show us better appreciation for more than a week of random 1 minute or less clips of principals wishing us a happy Teacher Appreciation Week and a profile picture frame on Facebook with a budget that prioritizes all frontline workers. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Vanessa Durand. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Vanessa Durand, D-U-R-A-N-D.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Dr. Vanessa Durand. I'm a licensed psychologist employed at MPS. I am one of 21 school psychologists who did not receive the 2020 Phase 2 and Phase 3 salary schedule placements and adjustments. I am providing this testimony in hopes that you will motion for and vote in favor of granting us our respective placement in the salary schedule with consideration of years outside of MPS and the retroactive pay adjustments that were given to the teachers, counselors, and social workers. This is especially important as newly hired school psychologists are being hired with credited outside years of service. School psychologists are vital to MPS's success. Just as Dr. Posley stated this evening, our individual roles and responsibilities may vary. However, as a collective, we are helping transform the way MPS serves our diverse student body. We help improve school-wide and classroom-based practices. We identify and support students in special education. We provide social, emotional, and behavioral interventions, counseling, and wraparound services. We do some of the hardest work in moments of student crises. School psychologists are key leaders in the advocacy for and implementation of major district initiatives, such as social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, and restorative practices. This year alone, we have realized more than ever the need for mental health professionals in schools. MPS is fortunate to have 166 highly qualified school psychologists. However, 13% of them are not being credited for their experiences outside of MPS. Each of the school psychologists come with unique experiences, ideas, and practices that make our students and schools stronger. With the state of affairs, we cannot afford to lose these individuals due to compensation concerns. As MPS focuses on recruiting and maintaining the employment of such people, this is the perfect time to take action by making sure all current staff are getting equitable pay while also meeting our students' mental health needs. Again, I urge you to motion for and vote in favor of your MPS school psychologist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Adrian Hicks. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Hello, my Adrian Hicks, Hicks.
Thank you.
My name is Adrian Hicks. I am a proud MPS paraprofessional at Kluge Elementary School for the past 3 years. I was also a para in the 90s at Brown Street Academy, where before the Act 10, I am today I serve proudly on the EA Council for the MTEA, and I am here tonight speaking on behalf of all educational assistants, paraprofessionals, and safety assistants in MPS. Paras, EAs, safety assistants, and parent coordinators play multiple roles in all MPS schools. We support student learning, safety, social, emotional wellness for our students, and hold critical relationships with MPS families. But we are not offered 40 hours of work in performing our duties, at least not today. Some of my duties include subbing when needed, when there's no substitute that comes into the building, being an awesome assistant to the lead teacher in the classroom, making sure everything is done the way that she wants it to be done, and then sometimes have to anticipate things that she may have overlooked. I work in a medically fragile classroom, which duties I perform are not necessarily under my job description, but I do them with joy, out of love for the children, not asking for anything more. My day normally is a 40-hour plus week, but I'm only paid for 30 hours. Back in when I first entered MPS, I had the opportunity to work 40 hours without paying for dental, without paying for insurance. Today, I don't have that opportunity. I am making less money now than I am and that I had in the past. We demand 40 hours for all paraprofessionals who need 40 hours. I ask for everyone to please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Debbie Schulz. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record. Hello. It appears that the device is muted.
I'm sorry. I'm Debbie Schultz. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. SCHULZ.
Thank you.
I'm a paraprofessional and I've been doing this position for 23 years. I have come up before the board so many times that I have not attended meetings and I have walked out of there crying because of the fact that we only make $16,000 a year. And the fact that my rent alone is $8,500 a year. So that means when you take and you split the remaining balance over the 12 months, I am trying to live on $583 a month. I consider myself very valuable. I have subbed many classes. I have done whatever has been asked of me, As a team member, I have taken children and taken care of them and hugged them when they're hurt and they're crying and everything else under the sun. And there is no teacher, no principal that will say that they do not want us. Because our last raise was $1.14. What happened is it put us, yes, it was a nice amount, $1.81%. But the problem is it put us in a higher tax bracket to pay more for our retirement and more for our insurance. So we got $1.14 raise for 2 weeks. I'm sorry, that is a real slap in the face to every single one of us that is working. I am 66 years old. I will be getting Social Security. Would I love to retire? Oh, heaven, yes, I would. But you know what? That's not a possibility. And I'm looking at having to work another 10 years because of the pension from MPS pays us nothing, and it's going to be impossible to live on. Please do something and think about us. Next, we need to do something and not throw paras into special inclusive classrooms, because I have two friends that are ready to have, one had a nervous breakdown and another one is ready. Not everyone can be in a room with screaming children all day. We are good people. Just put the right paras in the right positions where they need to go. Thank you very much, and I pray every night that you will listen to us with your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Aziza Phillips. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Hi, my name is Aziza Phillips, Phillips.
Thank you.
No problem. I would like to start off by asking a question, and that would be, is it possible to use ESSER funds to help students complete their apprenticeship programs at Department of Facilities and Maintenance and to continue to complete our apprenticeship programs and ensure employment? I am the first Milwaukee Public School student to go from youth apprentice to licensed journeyman. My face has been used by MPS in their marketing campaign to secure millions of dollars in funding over the course of my apprenticeship. I was told that if I complete the apprenticeship track they laid out for me, that it would result in employment here at MPS. The Department of Facilities and Maintenance did a wonderful job training me over the last 4 years and has expressed a desire to make my position permanent. They have also put in a request to make my position permanent, but the administration and the board seems to be
Madam
lacking.
Chair?
Yes.
This would be another individual employment matter. And tonight is about the overview of the budget. Would the speaker be willing to give us a call in the Office of Board Governance to allow us to address this matter?
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
So we can't really speak about individual employment issues on the board floor, but perhaps you can speak directly with the Office of Board Governance. But I think that the board is hearing that apprenticeship programs need more support. So perhaps.
Well, I was trying to speak as far as my position also, because I know that funds might have to be moved around, or my position doesn't even exist as of right now.
Okay.
Madam Chair, that is an individual employment matter, and we will be happy to assist Ms. Phillips. I can give you a number if you could call the Office of Board Governance at 414-475-8284.
And I believe do we have their contact information from registration? So if we don't hear directly from the two callers, can we follow up with them?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, we do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Jocelyn Wilder. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Jocelyn Wilder, last name Wilder.
Thank you.
My name is Jocelyn Wilder, and I am a Milwaukee Public School social worker assistant. and I've been a social worker assistant for over 30 years. And I'm asking for consideration for hazard pay and additional hours for the social worker assistants. I'm a member of ASME, and on behalf of Milwaukee Public Schools social worker assistants in their duties during the pandemic, we're doing home visits since the beginning of the school year. Many of us have been doing visits on a daily basis for the entire shift, and numerous families we have visited have had or had COVID-19. Our duties include gathering signatures, delivering Chromebooks and clothing, and monitoring attendance and delivering food. All of these contexts were crucial to the flow of serving our families, and we put them and ourselves in jeopardy of the virus. As COVID-19 hit the peak in the early years, social worker assistants were put in the front lines, poorly geared up, but ready for duty nonetheless. Being dedicated and compassionate to our duties, we compromise our life on a daily basis, and we feel that our tasks are important, just as important as other staffs, and we deserve hazard pay and extra hours. COVID-19 has taken the lives of over 1 million people, but over 500,000 people, but we as assistants stood the course. Please consider us for hazardous pay and additional hours to our workday. Thank you for listening to our request.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Kristen Lanto. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Kristen Lanto, L-A-N-T-T-O.
Thank you.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the board, Dr. Posley, and administration. Hello, my name is Kristen Lanto, and I've been a proud school psychologist of MPS for the past 12 and a half years. I said yes to MPS in 2008, and it turns out I made the right choice. I stayed at MPS due to my love of our students and the incredible support of my department. When Act 10 was passed, I took a sizable pay cut. So I picked up a second job, which I maintain today. And for 2 years, I worked 3 jobs, working over 60 hours per week to pay off my $65,000 college loan debt. So when I heard that the district had decided to give us a raise and place us back on the steps I was promised back in 2008, I was thrilled. However, my joy was quickly quelled when I heard that my 1 year of experience I had prior to coming to MPS would not be honored, despite having it been honored over the past 11 years. When I heard that teachers' years of experience were offered back again in May of 2020, I believed that psychologists would quickly follow suit, but this was not so. Over this past year, school psychologists have been the backbone of mental health supports for MPS students and families during possibly the most difficult time of their lives. We have worked often outside of work hours to support students who have mental health crises, all while continuing to do mandated duties. Lastly, we were required to test students in person, risking getting COVID before a vaccine was developed and available, while teachers could remain safe at home. So I sincerely ask that you respect the hard work of the school psychologist by honoring prior years of experience. And I ask this pay be retroactive to the timeline of when the teachers were granted their years of experience. I further ask that when decisions are made for MTEA, that the same decisions be immediately granted for the PAMS union, as we should be recognized as equally as vital a staff to the MPS community. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Angela Lucas Foley. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Angela Lucas Foley, Lucas space F as in Frank, Oley.
Thank you.
As a white school psychologist and the proud president-elect of PAMPS, the School Psychologists Union, please strongly consider proposing and passing an amendment that would allow school psychologists with previously accredited outside experience that was not applied to phase 2 of the salary schedule placements, which took place in January 2020, to now be properly placed in phase 3.
PAMPS looks forward to working with administration through the Meet and Confer to implement the Phase 3 adjustments that our educator colleagues have been enjoying for the entirety of the 2020-2021 school year, thanks to now President Bob Peterson's amendment that was proposed and passed during the last budget cycle. As I continue my testimony tonight, I am talking specifically about the frameworks surrounding equity and racial justice in the district. Page 4C-13 of the proposed budget states, the PBIS framework is used to support other initiatives such as restorative practices. As you prepare to examine the budget proposal in full force, with what racial magnifying glass are you looking at funding? What is the racial framework holding up the foundation in our school buildings? Is whiteness there? How is whiteness impacting conversations and funding allocations? In funding order, positive behavioral and intervention supports, PBIS, $609,000 proposed. Black and Latino male achievement, $355,000 plus a $3 million contract for mentoring proposed. Restorative practices, $4 million proposed. From what racial frame is this work being done? With what personnel and budget is each department given to organize this work? What does this tell us about the monetary value being placed on this work? Again, I urge the board of directors to look through a racial lens as you take the budget in full. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Jacqueline Miller. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Jacqueline Miller, Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Posley, Chair O'Halloran, and members of the board, thank you for allowing us to speak. I am a proud MPS paraprofessional at Benjamin Franklin Elementary. This is my first year in the district, but this past year has been one of the most impactful and fulfilling in my professional career. Having been virtual for over 75% of this current school year, then having to come back in person as we did, has allowed for a closer examination of how I may perform my job better. The current 30 hours does not give me, nor some of my colleagues, an opportunity to fulfill higher levels of excellence in which our students and their families deserve, and allowing for a more in-depth working relationship with colleagues that incorporates balance in the classroom and beyond. I'm here tonight as a proud member of my union, the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. I am speaking in support of a 40-hour work week for EAs in all job classes in Milwaukee Public Schools. Our students, MPS families, and our schools need to support a full-time support staff in every one of our schools. I'm a strong believer in the statement, we all do better when we all do better. Our students and their families and MPS families would do better with full-time support staff. All MPS workers will do better with the dignity of a 40-hour work week. This will allow for a decrease in EA shortages throughout the district, allowing there to be less of a need for two jobs in order to live a deserved living wage of income.
30 seconds.
I'm asking board directors and Superintendent Posley to make immediate revisions to the proposed budget to offer 40 hours to any para, EA, safety assistant, and any job class in the district who wants to work 40 hours. Please take action immediately to set aside budget dollars for a 40-hour work week. You all can count on us. Can we count on you? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platforms is James Nilsson. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record. Mr. Nelson?
Hello, this is James Nelson, Nelsen.
Thank you.
And I am here today to talk about high school funding. We heard a lot tonight about restoring funding for like art, music, physical education, early childhood. And those things are great and they're definitely needed, but they mostly apply to elementary schools. So I'm part of the MTEA, and we actually sent to meet and confer a proposal to restore high school funding to pre-Act 10 levels. Previous superintendents have gradually reduced funding for the high schools and the middle schools over the last several years so that we can no longer offer services that our competitors offer. As a result of these cuts, MPS loses many students after grade 5 and many others after grade 8 as families seek out full service voucher schools, charter schools, and suburban schools. So within this proposal, I was the author of item number 5, which would restore funding for extracurriculars, previously known as Schedule E. And it would also add 1 to 3 positions for each high school so that we could again have release time teachers. These release time teachers had lighter teaching loads prior to Act 10. They teach 3 classes or 4 instead of 5 or 6. And this is how you had student council advisors, yearbook advisors, newspaper advisors, PBIS coordinators, athletic directors. Most, if not all, of these programs have been cut from the high schools. We need to bring those back. It would improve school climate for students. It would also help improve school climate for teachers. Our proposal would also place limits on teaching loads so that we no longer have teachers teaching as many as 7 classes, and it would restore sub pay to previous levels. So to be fair to the superintendent, most people are not aware of these cuts over the years because they happen very slowly. However, these cuts have been devastating to the high schools and they're pushing students and teachers out of MPS. So I ask you to pause on this proposal, this budget proposal, until we have time to evaluate the high schools.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Deanna Rugsy. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Hello, Deanna Rugsy, R-U-G, Z as in zebra, I-E.
Thank you.
Carol Halloran, members of the committee and administration. I am an MPS school psychologist, and I'm urging you to motion for and vote in favor for MPS school psychologists hired with previously credited outside experience to be paid in accordance with their experience. This action was not taken for psychologists in the Phase 2 salary schedule placements in January 2020, nor adjusted for in Phase 3, unlike the approved 2021 budget amendment sponsored by now President Peterson, which not only corrected this for MTEA members, but also granted them retroactive pay. As one of the 21 school psychologists personally affected by this, I am deeply disheartened to learn that school psychologists were left out of this correction. It was even more frustrating to learn that our colleagues with credited experience hired during the 2020-2021 school year were placed on the approved 2020 step scale. I am kindly asking that you make a similar amendment for PAMPS in the 2021-2022 budget that was granted for other MPS employees. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform, okay, Madam Chair, I've been motioned by technology that would be the last speaker that we have on the platform to speak on this item.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We do have, we can do another round of questions if the board members would be interested in following up on any of their previous questions or reacting to any of the testimony that we heard.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Did I see anyone in the superintendent's office? I thought I saw a hand. No?
It's hard to see with this gallery view. Everyone's so very small. Superintendent Posley, is your administration team good? Or we can proceed to questions?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's kick it off with Director Carr, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to say I don't really have a question, but I want to be very clear about where I stand with the budget. I don't currently support the budget as it's currently written. And I will go so far as to say, it looks good, it sounds great. However, it lacks transparency, urgency, and it limits the prioritization of equity, access, and inclusion. The tenure of conversations that have changed from crisis-driven when the pandemic first started to addressing the digital divide and ensuring access to the, free nutritional meals to now advancing to today's proposed budget, which has plans that are not reflective of the times that we're living in, if that makes sense. There's a new normal that must be reflected in the budget, and it isn't. We're still functioning during a global pandemic. Black and brown children, students and staff in particular, are operating at a disadvantage. And what's worse is that those disparities have greatly increased. And so we've heard testimony from essential employees who have risked so much, yet they still showed up. And we've heard from parents who will not be re-enrolling their children in the district because they feel like the ball was dropped during the pandemic. We've heard from educators who have made the decision to end their careers with MPS. And so, I've even heard from those working in the transportation industry about their disappointment with the district. Yet and still, this budget is reflective of a time when things were normal, which then means that it's not reflective of the times that we're living in. And that's a great concern for me. And I'd be remiss to not mention that and speak on behalf of the residents of District 4 in particular, and then speaking as a parent of a child in the district. And so I want to go on record and say that I feel like the budget talks about the what, but not the how. And because of that, it just lacks transparency. So, yeah.
Thank you, Director Carr. Administration, would you like to react, or?
Cheryl Halloran, members of the board. Director Carr, thank you for your comments. And I would just say that we look forward to working with you and all of the board members and the entire community to make sure that our budget is transparent. It meets the needs of our young people and our families. That's our ultimate goal, to make that happen. And if there's things that are not there, we look forward to working together to place those things there to meet the needs of our students in our community.
Can I add another part? Thank you, Dr. Posley and administration. I do want to say, too, that I would even challenge the administrative team to shift how we engage the community, because door knocking, surveys, electronic surveys, relying on parents to go onto the portal and read. If we're talking about the overall budget, a 920-page budget, that's kind of unrealistic. And then I question what parts or what aspects of the community are we engaging? Is it the same individuals that we've continued to engage for some time now, that continues to push for the same issues? Or are we going to the pulse of the community, the parents who may not show up to parent-teacher conferences and who may not engage in these meetings? Are we going to them to hear their input? I think we need to shift the way that we're engaging the community, and then we need to engage different parts of the community. And so I do want to push back and challenge the administration to change the community engagement practices. And I think in that, we will see something different reflected in the budget, because the voice of those who are deeply entrenched or deeply rooted in the community will speak, and they have a lot to say, and they have a lot of concerns. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Carr. Let's go to Director Garcia.
Thank you, everyone, and specifically to the 20 speakers that we heard of from today. I think that really brings to light a lot of the issues that, are relevant on the folks that have decided to professionally invest their time, energy, and love into not only this district, but most importantly, the families and children that we serve. So just know that we're listening, and, it's great to hear from everyone, and this kind of like what your concerns are, and our role, as folks making these decisions is to hear how these, allocations and decisions that seem so impersonal have such strong ties to real impact and the stories and the lives of folks that have, been partners with us in this district. So that was a comment. As far as question, looking at what Director Peterson asked in terms of the more detailed allocation for the different categories and how that breaks down into the different schools within the budget, I just wanted to make sure that we also had something along that line with anything that had to do with the anti-racism and bias professional development. I think it would be really helpful for us to get an understanding as to, what that plan is for, how we're tackling anti-racism, specifically within the staff that we work with. And I guess the question that I had, and maybe administration, you can give us a little insight on this, is, as we're working with a pool of substitute teachers, is there a plan to embed any type of this anti-racist training for a substitute pool, considering that, these might be people that are, long-term in buildings. It might be someone who's there for a day. However, that can have long-lasting impact depending on, what is said, what is done within a school building. So I was wondering if there was anything around that component that had been, discussed or thought about.
Thank you. Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the board, thank you for your question, Director Garcia. One of the things that we are looking at is a large number of our substitute teachers are in long-term assignments, and those in a long-term assignment will automatically be a part of the cycling in. We also have set aside additional dollars so that we will be able to pick up new people to the building every single year. Because this year we picked up all of the high school and middle school teachers and administrators and staff. And so therefore there will be new individuals that will be coming to the staff, and monies are set aside to be able to pick those staff members up, and that's included with substitute teachers. However, we also have 10 individuals that are trained throughout the district to provide professional development on site around courageous conversations about race. And that's the purpose of paying for those 10 individuals so that they can facilitate professional development for other groups as we move forward. And that is something that we will make sure that we go back and look at the idea around the substitute teacher pool of new candidates that's coming in to make sure with the orientation process, is there a way to roll that in to make sure that everyone that is coming before our students will have that training.
Thank you. And a follow-up to that is that, listed in the supplemental information, we have that, courageous conversations. We're looking at about 100 sessions with 80 MPS. So does that mean that we're targeting 800 folks to be trained? Can you just speak a little bit about that? And, because I know this is folded into the 3-year term, and it just seems like there's a lot more staff that needs to be part of that. So I'm just wondering what that, I guess, means from, your perspective.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, one of the things that we're doing, our goal is to provide professional development and that particular training to all school staff as well as district staff that's here at the district, the superintendent's office and all the district staff.
Okay, thank you. And I think we were, just for Director Garcia, also, we're going to be talking about this. I expect to be hearing more about this at PACE in June. So hopefully we can get more details if it does not come out through the budget process.
Thank you.
Director Herndon.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just skipped right over Director Gokul-Gandhi, and I am so sorry, Director Herndon, but we'll
Go
get
back
to you next.
to her. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair O'Halloran. I have a question regarding just another addition to Director Peterson's inquiry. I would like to see a charted out for the FTEs. So, you said, I think 30 some FTEs were added. Where are those additions? 39 teachers were added. Where are those additions? And then also FTEs and teachers in individual school buildings. Where are we losing? Where are we gaining? And maybe just a categorization of that. And then really quickly, reflecting the testimony, is it possible, as a new board member, I'm going to go and look up the resolution, but getting a sense of the financial implication of having hazard pay and putting school psychologists into that pay schedule and really respecting the work that they've done. What are the budget implications for that? I would love if we could see a memo or just how that would fit in our budget. So those would be my 2 questions.
Thank you. Administration?
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board. One of the things that this is a fluid process, and there is a amendment that board members can make, and anything that we can move anything. So it's just the idea that's an option that everyone has as board members to share. This is our best thinking, and if there's something we missed, we are ready to embrace and move forward to make it happen.
Thank you. And I, just to follow up, I had asked for this information to be provided in an email. I think maybe last week, and I know we have a lot of emails. So hopefully this analysis is already being done and can be forwarded to the board members for their, but if you would like it, would you prefer it be submitted through an amendment process just for our edification, or can you respond to the request prior to that process?
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, we will be more than happy to respond to it, but I was just only referring if you wanted something changed or whatever the situation, but we will give you numbers of where we are and our rationale for our thinking around it. We will be more than happy to provide that for you as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And now we'll get to Director Herndon, my mistake.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I totally agree with all that I've heard so far and share in the requests that have been made. So I'm going to move to another topic, which is communications and school performance. What I was specifically noticing and have noticed over a long period of time tonight, prior meetings, was the lack of communications. We're constantly asking about, well, give us this report so that it can be presented to the community, all of those types of things. And I had looked in the budget to try to determine the number of people working in communications, the funding allocated for communications, and I did not really find it. What I found was, I think it's 4 positions, 4 FTEs to be hired, but I don't know if they're really for the communications portion of that department. The reason why I don't know is because the department is titled Communications and School Performance. Under that umbrella, there are 7 other departments. So when I look at the budget and there's X amount of dollars going to communications and school performance, if I want to know on an individual basis how much is going to each of the 7 individually, I don't know. So my question is, I want to know the staffing, current staffing, pretty much the same thing we've asked for other things, prior year, current year, staffing requests, what the budget is for that department, what the functions are for those individuals that are classified under communications. Because repeatedly, we're pretty much even down to, Madam Chair, what you asked for tonight about the creation of a committee to come up and collect data and that type of thing. And I think that we really need it. It's the 21st century. We absolutely need to start taking a look at how we're doing communications to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Administration, would you like to respond?
Cheryl Halloran and members of the board, I wanted to say, Director Herndon, thank you for your question and your inquiry. I will say to you that's 5 positions. It is totally under the Office of Communication. We are looking at how we can beef up our internal communication as well as our external communication. We're looking at our marketing platform. What do we need to do around marketing and all of those kinds of things? So there's 5 positions there. And we'll be more than happy to get that information broken out for you. So the increase is in that area, and we have learned through this pandemic that we need more people, more personnel there, and more. So that is something that we try to do through this budget to enhance that office.
Thank you. And we have Vice Chair Leonard.
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank the speakers. Your input is always valuable to me. It also helps to answer a lot of questions that I think a lot of us have that we cannot ask. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I have a couple of, I guess, more considerations. So one is we didn't talk too much about special education. I did ask Dr. Posley a portion of this question earlier this week. I just want to keep in mind that if we do somehow get bipartisan support and get that extra funding, that increased funding per student for special ed, that we make sure that we utilize that funding as much as possible with regards to caseloads and in the classrooms. I want to make sure that we use that in the right way. Secondly, I guess it's sort of a question. Was any money set aside from the ESSER funds to offer community-type programs for adult ESL and citizenship classes? Thank you.
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board. First of all, Director Leonard, thank you for your question as well. And one of the things that we are looking at is how we can better service our special needs students. And we have taken in consideration just what you shared and hope that we get that 50% funding in the governor's budget. The last piece that you asked about is something that we are taking a look in the budget for. Is not a indirect amount that is placed there, but there is some other amounts that's placed for various other activities and opportunities where dollars can be used just for that.
Thank you. And I would just remind everybody that you can still weigh in on the state budget. If you think that special education funding is important, everybody has a chance to speak with their legislators still. And with that, we'll go to Director Peterson.
Thank you. Just following up on that, by our calculations that Chris Thiel has made, if they did reimburse us at 50%, we would get about between 49 and $55 million, which would be lots of it. Could be lots of extra teachers and support for our students. I want to thank the speakers as well. I will be asking the superintendent for some breakdown of what it would cost on a number of these proposals, so that and to have that shared with everyone. So when we do want to think about making amendments, we are sort of all on the same page in terms of what it might cost. I also just, since people are new to the budget process, some people here, I just was wondering if the superintendent could talk about two things that sometimes slip under the the OPED, explain a little bit about OPED and what our responsibilities are there. And also, there is historically a contingency fund, is something which last year we sort of ate up in the process of doing amendments. The contingency fund historically has been important because come third Friday, there'll be situations where there'll be enrollment not quite up to what was expected, and if nothing is available in terms of some extra funds, it can mean very large class sizes in some schools. It could mean grade level splits in elementary schools that are just really not that helpful to instruction. And the superintendent has the ability then to allocate to a school, say a cost of a teacher to keeps the school in a place where it can serve best. And I just wanted, if the administration could just comment a little on those two parts of the budget that we haven't talked about yet tonight.
Thank you. Administration, OPEB.
Cheryl Halloran and members of the board. Thank you, Director Peterson, for your question. The contingency fund. I will say to you that this year is going to be more than ever important to make sure we have money set aside in a contingency fund. Just like Director Peterson alluded to earlier, this is an opportunity for, if we get unders or overs, if we get a number of students over, that's a good thing, but sometimes our schools come up short on third Friday, and we don't want to have to move teachers around. So we are able to stand up that cost. And I would say this year is going to be important because our numbers at the kindergarten through first grade levels were low. And we're going to have to backfill and make up for that because we look to see those students back with us. When we're in full in person, those students will be back there. But the idea, if they don't return, we will have some shortfalls. So we really need to look at that. Also, we run into situations where we have overages in some places, and especially at the high school level around the programming piece and trying to make sure that we got ample classes for all of our students. So therefore, that money is used to freighted costs to support schools and school communities to keep them whole so that we don't have to cut staff. We can add paras, we can add any type of staff that we need to add. And then so we talk about social emotional learning. That's another piece where we will have to add additional staff. Some school communities may need it more than others. And, they might have one FTE and we may have to add additional staff to support. So those are things that we do with that funding. I'm going to have Martha Kreisman to talk about the OPEB liabilities and concerns.
Hello, Cheryl Halloran and members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. Our OPEB liability, which our goal is to pay off in 2037, is about $60 million per year that we're paying into OPEB. And I don't know, do you have anything additional? With the early retirement that we provided last year through the budget, that added, and we had prepaid some OPEB last year. And so the ending yearly amount for that came to almost 7 million. I think it was just under 7 million. Mm-hmm.
Director Peterson, do you want to ask any clarification? It looks like you are pondering something there.
I just want to point out that, that liability has to do with the fact that for decades, MPS was the one and only provider, really, of schooling in the district. And we have a responsibility to the people who have worked for 25, 30, or 40 years in the district. It's something that new schools don't have, that financial liability. And it's something we just have to, the administration has put it into the budget. I just wanted to make sure that people know, full transparency, so people can see that. Thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson. Director Seedson.
Thank you, Chair O'Halloran. In the list that Director Peterson has asked for, I was wondering if with our library staffing, if that could be a part of it, and also a breakdown within that of how many librarians that includes and how many paras that includes for staffing our libraries. And then I just had a question about MPSU in terms of, I noticed the funding for that, at least it looked like it was pretty consistent. Is that a program that we're meeting the need for? Is that enrollment? Are there people on a waiting list, or do we have a sense of whether or not we've invested enough money there in this upcoming budget?
Thank you, Administration.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, yes, Director Simpson, we have the dollars are consistent. That's there. MPSU is a major recruiting tool for the district. We have a number of staff. That's probably one of our largest pipeline as far as with bringing in teachers and staff of color. So it is moving. We also have that money set aside. Then we have a pot of money for tuition reimbursement that teachers can also get. So there's two different places that money is set aside. And we are constantly working with local philanthropy and other outside groups also to bring in tuition reimbursement dollars to support individuals who are returning back to school to receive license as teachers in this district. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Chair O'Halloran. Also, I'm sorry, Lynn Rule, Director of Financial Planning and Budget. We also have some funds in I believe it's 200,000 in the referendum.
Yes.
For those same costs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then we have Director Taylor.
Thank you, Chair O'Halloran. Another best two-part question and comment. I heard a couple people talk about tech. Have we thought about expanding our tech program and maybe adding something in reference to the youth entrepreneurship? And then also, I know we're asking for a breakdown with certain entities and educators, but I've been asked a lot of questions by the community in reference to the state aid we received, the referendum, and then the CARES Act pay. Is there some way that can be broken down to see which level it went to, but broken down in a way that the community can read it, not like another 50-page booklet that they won't be able to understand it? That's something that's truly needed.
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, members of the board. Thank you, Director Taylor, for your question. As far as the tech program, yes. And I'm just proud to announce tonight that at Barack Obama School, we will be working in partnership with Johnson Control to be bringing in a state-of-the-art lab there. We are also looking at tech programs. We're getting ready to open up 6 GE labs throughout the district because we want to start our young people early in the early grades and in all of our middle schools and a few of our K-8 schools that is out there. So yes, we're looking at the tech programs that we have in place and trying to enhance and push more forward. So looking at that particular piece, this is with the 6 and that one, that's basically 7 new programs that is going to be moving forward in our schools for the upcoming school year and also as a part of this budget process. The other thing that you asked and inquired about was the idea of a list of things around ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 of how we could get that to families and so that it's understandable. I've talked with the team. Yes, we can do just that and how we spent those dollars.
Very good, Director Taylor. Do you want to ask a clarifying question? It looks like you have a thought still. Very good.
I do. Sorry, and maybe it's on a different topic. But also, we heard about the 40 hours. I'm coming from somebody who used to be an employee and worked in those positions. Are we actually looking at, when we talk about equitable, these individuals that have worked for the district for many years, doing something to supplement those extra hours. We're in a COVID, in the middle of a pandemic. We know a lot of those EAs and paras are actually taking on classrooms. And just if we want to be a district that often talks about equitable, anti-bias, race, and things of that nature, our lowest paid workers that are below 40 hours, we need to be the change that we talk about all the time and put it into action to actually get there. So what are our plans to increase the hours or work on that ways to 40 hours for those individuals?
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board. The first part of the question, the second part of the question I will start with is the idea if there is a para or anyone that is covering a class for a teacher or taking over for a teacher, we have guidelines where on the second day, the para gets the additional pay. But right now, and what we've been doing is right away, we have been allowing that additional pay to happen when that takes place. The other part of it is that I've had the financial team to take a close look at if all paras and was in our district were moved to 40 hours, what it will be, and do a deeper analysis on which schools, because some schools it will cost more at some schools than it would at others, but looking at that for those individuals that desire to be 40 hours.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then I am going to ask my question. I just actually wanted to make a statement, and then I will ask my question. As part of Director Peterson's, the response to Director Peterson's question about the contingency fund, there was mention made of when we're full in person, we can recover some of the kindergartners and first grade students who may have left the district. And I know tonight we are talking about the budget, but I do feel that the quicker we can communicate to the public what our desires and our plans are for the fall, it will help us start those conversations. I know one of my families made mention that they were accepted into a suburban district and they are contemplating leaving because that district is offering in-person in fall full-time. So I know we are focused on the budget tonight, and so I'm not saying we should speak about that now, but I would like sometime in the month of May that we at least start thinking about that and planning for what fall will look like for our families so they can start making those decisions and our schools can start having those conversations with their families as well. And then, so my question is around something we haven't really talked about much. So we have a lot of technology that we didn't have in the past. One of my principals made the comment that she felt like we had leapt forward by like a decade. So we have a lot of Chromebooks and hotspots, and we may need to address Wi-Fi in our schools. I was just wondering, I think we had created positions for tech people, and I was wondering if we've staffed those adequately so that I just even keeping track of inventory is probably a new task that we may need assistance with. So are we adequately staffed with the IT professionals who are supporting our virtual learning and helping us through, this next phase now that we have all of this new technology?
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, I would just say thanks to the board for approving 17 positions last year to make sure that we were able to meet those needs. I'm going to turn it over to Chad Myers to kind of talk about his staffing piece and where is he on that. Chad?
Director O'Halloran, first of all, Chad Myers, Senior Director, Department of Technology, Director O'Halloran, or Chair O'Halloran, members of the board. As far as technology, we were allocated, or the board graciously approved 17 positions. They're currently working their way through the HR process. 5 of those positions were coaching positions, which are, very much needed in the schools to help support a lot of this new technology and make sure teachers can use it effectively. We also, as far as internet and Wi-Fi, we do have a couple board items coming up in May to increase our internet capacity, our district internet capacity. We're currently doing okay as far as internet goes, but we want to make sure we're prepared for the fall for really anything that can happen, because we don't know what learning is going to look like. It's very fluid. So I think we're in pretty good shape right now. But thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Just want to make sure that Mr. Meyer isn't single-handedly keeping us afloat with all of these many technology needs. And I do see Director, so at this point, I have no more questions. I do see Director Carr has her hand raised on the platform. So if there is anybody else who would like to make comments or ask questions at this time, I think we can do another, a few more questions. It is 8:30 though, so I'm not sure what the appetite of the board is. So Director Carr, did you have a question or a comment?
Question. So just for clarification, I know that, and I know the federal funding is still kind of up in the air regarding the exact amount. But I had a question with regards to how we're prioritizing the funding restrictions for the use of the federal funds. I read that the American Rescue Plan Act, CARES, all of that. It's 20% must be spent to mitigate learning loss. And I am under the impression that the money should not be spent on legacy costs like staffing or anything relative to costs related to benefits. And so I'm curious to know, like, what or how are we prioritizing the funding restrictions centered around the federal funds? And I don't know if that's a question we can answer now or if that's something that we follow up on later. Yeah.
Administration, yeah, if you could just speak about like the timeline. So I know we've already gotten CARES, so we've had ESSER 1, and I believe we're going to be talking about ESSER 2. We have the supplement, and those decisions may be made as early as June with the understanding that it needs to be spent over a certain amount of time, and then ESSER 3. So maybe with the timeline, and then just more clarification around what the restrictions are, would that be responsive, Director Carr?
Yeah, and then how are we prioritizing that spending? Like, in what ways? And so I know that will require for them to take more time to answer that. But yes.
Chair O'Halloran and Director Carr, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. There are other restrictions around the ESSER 3 funding than there are with the ESSER 1 and 2, as far as even just the planning of it, as Dr. Posley has mentioned. So what will be important is, as we're planning with different constituents, that everyone understands what are the restrictions with the funding. And as we talked about before, buying staff is difficult because the funding is shorter term, well, like 3 years. So, it goes to 2024. And a lot of the funding, actually what's allowable is pretty aligned between ESSER 1, 2, and 3, as far as what you could spend the money on, because it's supposed to help with, like as we did in ESSER 2 planning, accelerating learning. That should be a portion of it. It can help with facility concerns as it relates to the pandemic. So the things that we're considering should somehow relate back to the pandemic and how this funding is helping us through this time.
Do you feel like you need a follow-up, Director Carr? Or
I'm okay for now. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Carr. I see two people's hands up. I saw Director Taylor's first, and then I'll come to Director Peterson.
Thank you, Chair O'Halloran. I had the opportunity to meet with some students in MPS, and thank them for what's in their hands and the issues and challenges. So two of the things came up is nutrition, and I know this isn't falling on deaf ears because this is something that
Oh no, Madam Secretary, did we? Oh, there she is. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying not to move. They were just asking, how are we looking at nutrition? And is it the vendor that we go with? Because when you think about the food that's being served, the majority of students, even though this helps a lot of students and families, there's also a lot that goes to waste. Like my son does not eat school lunch, and anybody knows him, he loves to eat and cook. So are we looking at different food varieties or maybe a different vendor? Also, they wanted curriculum around the lives of Black and Brown people, not just doing a week of Black educators, but something that can be year round. So two of the things that came up was the nutrition and what are we doing about the food, and then also having them ingrained in everyday learning and not just for 1 week of service.
Thank you. Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, Director Taylor, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. We have been working very hard and diligently about nutrition services. And I know that the nutrition team has been working hard to help during this time. And we also have a partnership that is helping us look at the ingredients in our food. We do have to work within the parameters we're given through the federal government and some of the food sourcing that we're provided. But one of the additions in the budget is to hire a chef that could possibly help us with the taste of food, and we'll see how that addition will help and possibly expand from there.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board. And the second part of Director Taylor's question has to do with offerings that we offer our young people. And what some of the things that we're doing, we talked about the Student Leadership Institute, looking at student voice to get those things out there so we know exactly what their needs and desires are so that we can offer. We also started the last school year talking and working with schools around school governance councils, making sure that all children have school governance council, the superintendent advisory, and various groups that, the YES group, LIT group, various groups that we have out there to kind of start talking about what their needs are and what they want. And that has been really proven in the community schools because they have gone as far as talking about some of the career changes, curriculum changes that's needed to make sure that they have a wholesome school environment and a productive learning environment. So we are looking for opportunities and sharing around that and trying to meet the needs. That whole piece around ethnic studies and those kinds of things are some of the things that have spin out and some of the things that we have heard from our young people. And we will continue to listen and find those avenues of various classes that they want to see offered that will meet their academic needs.
Thank you. Director Peterson.
Yes, a couple of thoughts. First of all, my understanding is that we are going to, hopefully on May 27th, adopt a amended budget that will be based on the 3 documents that's been provided to us thus far. That is to say, the base budget, the referendum, and the ESSER 2 that we are going to be debating and hopefully putting that together by the end of May. My thinking, and this is just an initial thought, is that in June we would start actually discussing the ESSER 3, and there might be things that are necessary for us to decide upon, so that might affect facilities, more, things having to do with the unknown in September. But we do also then have October, when we come back and we have to amend sometimes and approve a final budget, because it's in October that we will know the exact amount of state aid that's either coming to us or being stolen from us. And so I see that with June to October time to get a lot of input on ultimately the ESSER 3. I do just want to mention two things that I think that we can also keep in mind. One is, I'm pretty certain that that community schools is listed as one of the things that can be supported. I'm not sure if the administration knows if it's ESSER 2 or 3 or both. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is that one of the concerns of many people in the community is to make our community greener, less polluted, less reliant on carbon emissions. And, we started through the climate justice resolution that was passed a while back doing that. I'd just like to ask the administration, I know there was talk of possibly hiring an energy manager to help in this process. We can actually save money if we manage our energy well, and that it also goes into fixing, making our windows more efficient, our HVAC systems, and so on and so forth. So part of our effort is to green our economy and green our school districts. I'm not sure if the administration wants to comment either on the timeline or the issue of community schools or energy manager. Thank you.
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran, Director Peterson, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. As part of the conversation around ESSER 2, I know that we talked about this energy manager, and in talking with the Director of Facilities and Maintenance, he was very on board with continuing with that. And as far as this year, we have a position, I know, that was in the budget that we want to continue having, and we will have for fiscal year 22. But adding another, that position isn't an energy manager, so it would be adding that manager, and we can definitely see to adding that into the budget, because I know we did talk about it. I'd have to see exactly how that was handled.
Director O'Halloran, members of the board, we also have a number of outdoor classrooms that are being offered here that you will see in the budget as well.
Thank you for that. And then can you clarify, is Director Peterson correct that the ESSER 2 supplement that is being provided will be passed as part of the May budget cycle, or is this coming back for discussion in June? I was of the understanding that there would be a discussion in June, and I wasn't sure if that was planning for ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. Just want to understand the timeline so we're all on the same page, please.
O'Halloran and members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. We were hoping that it would be part of this May process, because then we could start the work that needs to be done, and some things are more urgent than others, and with a short timeline, we do need to get moving on some of these items.
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. The ESSER 3 piece will be coming back in June. because that's a more in-depth process that we have to go through and walk through. We got, just like I said, that we had a briefing today on that, and there's some real detail work that is going to have to go in place with the ESSER 3 funding. So therefore, we will come back to the board and share with you once the application is made available. But in June, just walking through, setting up those committees and doing the things that we need to do on our end, and making sure that we have all the sign-offs that needs to be in place for ESSER 3 funds.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I saw Director Gokul Gandhi.
Sure. Thank you. I have two quick questions. So one, as we're talking about infrastructure, additions via the ESSER 2 and 3 and the American Recovery Act, just wanted to keep in mind making sure that any of the upgrades that we made really reflect equity for our trans youth and gender nonconforming students, and that those additions are made. And then as we talk about school nutrition, I know that there was some talk about a central commissary that would be that would tackle not only thinking differently about the food that we serve, but also has the ability for full-time wages. And so I know that was talked about a couple of years ago, but I think if we could think differently about the way we deliver food and the way we, with the chef that you're thinking about hiring. So just wanted to get your feedback on both of those things. Thank you.
Administration.
Chair O'Halloran and Director Gokul Gandhi, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer, members of the committee. I know there was talk about that central kitchen idea. We have the idea that we have right now, and I'd like to talk and hear more about your idea, is that we really need a place for our nutrition team to have a kitchen that's like a school kitchen, so they can do more like research and development type things and create food that can be recreated in the schools, as we could move to more fresh food in the schools in that way. And so I don't know if this funding would allow for something like that, but it would help with, it would help in a couple ways. If we didn't do it here at Central Services, that staff could be moved out of Central Services and provide more room for staff to, physically distance within this building, and also provide them a space they could do research and development type activities and provide professional development for their staff. And we could also use it for other events as decided,
And then there was one other question about how we are keeping our trans and gender nonconforming students in mind as we're talking about upgrades. Does administration have any comments about that?
Chair O'Halloran and members of the board, yes, absolutely, we're doing that. That is some of the work, some of the major work of our Equity, Access, and Inclusion Office, and they're, making sure that we have everything in order in our schools, and then when there are upgrades in our school, making sure that we are confirming as well.
Thank you. And then I see Director Simpson's hand so patiently waiting on the platform.
It is. Thank you, Chair O'Halloran. So I'm glad that nutrition was brought up. I did have a question. I saw that the fresh fruit and vegetable program, there was an increase in funding. Is that just due to the increase of cost of that program, or is that program expanding? I know this past year was very different in terms of how we distributed food. So if someone could just explain a little bit more about where we're moving forward with that fresh fruit and vegetable program.
O'Halloran, Director Simpson, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. I think the pandemic has brought with it, devastating things, and It's been a very hard time for everyone, but it's also brought some new learning for all of us. And the fresh fruit and vegetable program was one of those new learnings we had as how we delivered that service for families. And we would really like to continue that model and sending, so as students are in person now, we have students that are still on the virtual platform, but we have students in person. We are allowing those students that are in person to take produce home with them. And so kind of doing the same delivery model where they can bring a bag of fresh fruits and vegetables home to cook something at home with their families. And we are hoping to continue that into the future.
Thank you. That is fabulous to hear.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other questions, comments from board members? Director Herndon.
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Totally understand. Hear you loud and clear. So, Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
Oh, look at that. I would like to remind the listening audience that the board has scheduled 2 more meetings this month to consider the FY22 proposed budget. More information may be found at esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Written testimony may be sent to the Office of Board Governance by mail to 5225 West Valete Street, Milwaukee 53221. Is that the right zip code?
53201-2181.
Yes, it's in the script as 53221, which I was like, nope, that's mine. By email to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us and by fax to 475 8071. And just for the audience and for the board members, reminder, we can submit our budget amendments for this first round, should be submitted to the Office of Board Governance by noon on Tuesday, May 11th. And before I go, I want to just add 2 more things. One, in Teacher Appreciation Week, just want to say thank you to all of our educators. I know we also had Principal Appreciation Day. I want to thank our principals. It's been a very challenging year. I want to thank the administration. I know everybody's had a challenging year, and so I'm very thankful for everybody. And also just wanted to shout out that we may have vaccinations available for the 12 to 15. Some pharmacies are already making appointments as early as next week, pending authorization. And so if you are a parent or a guardian and you have questions, maybe follow up with your doc. Otherwise, maybe start seeking those out, because we can start getting our 6th graders on up, possibly vaccinated. So that would be great news. And there being no further business before this committee, this meeting is adjourned.
So noted.